Within 3 minutes, an office of 200 employees turned into chaos, all because of one email. No one knows who hit reply all, but the message exposed something the company tried to bury forever. Secret layoffs, a forbidden relationship with the boss, everything leaked at once. And by the end of the day, someone would lose their job, or maybe their life at this company forever. The morning light filtered through the glass walls of Hawthorne Technologies, a mid-sized corporate firm in downtown Seattle. The office was quiet, almost deceptively calm, with the soft hum of computers and distant typing filling the air. Alex Mercer, a 29-year-old male, worked as a communications coordinator. He was of average height, slightly lean, with neatly combed brown hair and tired hazel eyes that often showed signs of late nights. He always wore simple office shirts, blue or white, never drawing attention to himself. Alex was known as reliable but invisible, the type of employee who fixed problems but never got credit for them. A past experience of being wrongly blamed in his previous job had made him overly cautious and anxious about mistakes. That morning, Alex was already stressed. His manager had urgently assigned him to handle a batch of internal emails marked high priority, a task meant for 2 people but dumped on him alone. Eric Hawthorne, the CEO of the company, was a man in his mid-40s with sharp facial features, salt and pepper hair, and a cold, controlled demeanor. He always wore expensive tailored suits that reinforced authority. Eric rarely spoke more than necessary, and employees described him as polite but unreadable. Recently, however, he had become more distant, spending hours in closed-door meetings. Mia Collins, 26, worked in the marketing department. She had long blonde hair, striking blue eyes, and a confident posture that made her stand out in any room. Unlike Alex, she was socially active in the office and often seen near upper management. Some employees admired her charm, while others quietly resented the attention she received. Rumors had started circulating that her rapid career growth was not entirely due to performance. Daniel Brooks, 31, was a tall, thin IT specialist with messy black hair and pale skin from long hours in front of screens. He had a calm but paranoid personality, shaped by a past incident where a data breach in his previous company had been unfairly blamed on his negligence. Since then, Daniel had become obsessive about system logs and security patterns. That morning, Eric Hawthorne held a closed-door meeting with the human resources director. No employees were allowed nearby, but whispers suggested the discussion involved structural downsizing and budget cuts. Meanwhile, Mia Collins was seen entering Eric's office twice within an hour, something unusual enough to spark quiet attention among nearby employees. Alex, meanwhile, struggled with the email system. A batch of internal reports was waiting for approval, but the interface lagged heavily. He muttered under his breath, unaware that this simple task would soon change everything. At 10:14 a.m., the system flagged a high-priority internal memo that Alex was supposed to forward only to a small executive group. One mistake was all it would take. The moment Alex Mercer pressed send, the screen froze for half a second longer than usual. It was enough time for him to notice something was wrong, but not enough to stop it. A system confirmation flashed briefly, then disappeared. His stomach dropped. The email, meant for a restricted executive group, had been sent to the entire company directory through a misconfigured reply all chain. Across the office floor, within seconds, phones started buzzing. Employees looked up from their desks, confusion turning into alarm as notifications stacked rapidly. Alex remained frozen, eyes locked on his monitor, realizing the scale of what had just happened. In the IT department, Daniel Brooks immediately noticed the abnormal spike in internal mail traffic. Daniel was a 31-year-old system analyst, tall and thin with pale skin, messy black hair, and dark eyes that always looked exhausted. Years ago, he had been wrongly blamed for a corporate data breach, and since then, he had developed an obsessive habit of tracking every irregular system pattern. As he scanned the logs, he noticed something unusual. The email propagation route did not follow standard server behavior. There was a faint trace of an unauthorized access signature embedded within the transmission process. He narrowed his eyes. "This isn't just a mistake," he muttered quietly, leaning closer to his screen. On the marketing floor, Mia Collins opened the email. Mia was 26, with long blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, and a polished appearance that made her stand out in any room. She had always been confident in public, but her rapid promotion within the company had created silent resentment and rumors about her relationship with CEO Eric Hawthorne. As she read the contents, her expression stiffened. The email referenced internal restructuring plans and a priority talent review, which many interpreted as favoritism toward her. She slowly placed her phone down, forcing herself to maintain composure as coworkers began whispering nearby. On the executive level, Eric Hawthorne, a man in his mid-40s with sharp facial features, salt and pepper hair, and a controlled, intimidating presence, was in a closed meeting when his assistant interrupted. Without a word, Eric took the tablet and read the email. His expression remained calm, but his eyes hardened slightly. He ended the meeting immediately and ordered a full internal containment response. Within minutes, chaos spread through the company network. IT began tracing the origin of the email, but Daniel discovered something even more disturbing. Certain log entries had been altered or partially erased, as if someone had tried to cover their tracks. Downstairs, employees reacted in different ways. Some forwarded the email, others deleted it in panic, and a few secretly saved copies. Alex still sat at his desk, motionless, as the reality of the situation fully collapsed onto him. The leaked email had not just entered the company's system, it had infected it. Within 5 minutes of the initial reply all incident, Hawthorne Technologies transformed from a structured corporate environment into a fractured battlefield of suspicion and panic. Employees stopped working. Conversations turned into whispers. Screens filled with forwarded copies of the same email, each new share amplifying fear rather than clarity. Alex Mercer remained seated at his desk, but the distance between him and his colleagues had grown invisible, yet suffocating. People no longer looked at him as a coworker. They looked at him as a threat. In the legal department, a new figure entered the story, Emily Carter, a 38-year-old corporate compliance officer with a tall, angular frame, sharp cheekbones, and tightly tied silver blonde hair. Known for her strict professionalism and emotional detachment, Emily had built her reputation after surviving a previous company scandal, where she exposed internal fraud that nearly ended her career. That experience hardened her personality, making her distrustful of employee intentions. As she reviewed the leaked document, her expression remained unreadable, but her fingers tightened slightly around her pen. She immediately requested all communication logs tied to the email incident. Meanwhile, in the operations floor, Ryan Miller, a 24-year-old junior analyst with messy brown hair, casual clothing, and an anxious demeanor, began quietly questioning coworkers. Unlike Emily, Ryan lacked authority but compensated with curiosity. He had joined the company only 6 months earlier and still believed truth could be uncovered through logic rather than hierarchy. Ryan noticed something strange. Different departments were interpreting the same email in completely different ways, creating fragmented narratives that fueled internal conflict. Some believed layoffs were targeted randomly, others thought it was a structured purge, while a few insisted Mia Collins was at the center of it all. The company was no longer unified. It had split into competing belief systems. Alex began hearing his name in conversations that stopped the moment he approached. One colleague whispered, "He probably did it on purpose," while another suggested, maybe he was paid to leak it. The accusation had no evidence, but repetition was enough to turn suspicion into perceived truth. Across the IT department, Daniel Brooks continued analyzing system logs. Daniel, a 31-year-old with pale skin, dark, tired eyes, and a thin frame shaped by years of isolation, replayed the email routing sequence again and again. His past experience of being wrongly blamed for a data breach had made him obsessive about finding technical truth rather than assumptions. What he discovered unsettled him further. The email did not follow a standard propagation path. There were microgaps in the server trace, brief interruptions suggesting that someone had accessed the system externally during the transmission window. This was not typical human error. It indicated interference. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "Someone else was inside," he whispered. On the executive floor, internal meetings escalated. Emily Carter demanded full audit access, while HR tried to contain information flow. Eric Hawthorne remained silent in most discussions, observing rather than reacting. The The company was no longer trying to fix the problem. It was trying to control the narrative. Downstairs, Alex finally stood up, feeling the weight of hundreds of silent accusations pressing against him from every direction. The email had stopped being a mistake. It had become a weapon, and he was now the identified carrier. The tension inside Hawthorne Technologies had already reached a boiling point, but the leaked email had now triggered something deeper, curiosity turning into obsession. Employees were no longer focused on the content of the email alone. They were focused on the people mentioned inside it. Mia Collins became the center of that storm. Whispers followed her through every hallway, growing louder each time she passed. She sat at her desk in the marketing department, her posture straight and controlled, but her fingers trembled slightly as she typed meaningless replies to avoid eye contact. Mia Collins, 26, had always presented herself as confident and polished, with long blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, and a carefully maintained professional image. She was known for her ability to speak smoothly in meetings, but few knew that her confidence was something she had built after years of struggling in unstable jobs and being underestimated due to her youthful appearance. Before joining Hawthorne Technologies, she had worked in smaller firms where she was often ignored despite strong performance, which had shaped her ambition and need for recognition. That history made her especially sensitive to rumors now spreading through the company. In the executive office, Eric Hawthorne, a man in his mid-40s with a rigid posture, salt and pepper hair, and an unreadable expression, was dealing with escalating internal pressure. Although he maintained calm authority, the situation was slipping beyond his control. He issued a short internal statement, denying any irregular promotion practices, but the message only fueled more suspicion rather than calming it. Employees interpreted it as confirmation that something was being hidden. Meanwhile, a new figure entered the narrative, Sarah Mitchell, a 33-year-old HR coordinator with shoulder-length dark brown hair, soft facial features, and a nervous but observant personality. She was not highly authoritative, but she had access to sensitive employee records. Sarah had always been conflict-averse, shaped by a previous workplace where she was blamed for mishandling confidential documents, causing her to become overly cautious and emotionally reactive under pressure. As she reviewed Mia's employment file, she noticed a pattern of unusually fast approvals and exceptions granted by upper management, all signed off during late hours. This discovery made her uneasy, but she hesitated to escalate it without confirmation. Back in the marketing department, Mia began noticing subtle shifts in behavior from her colleagues. Conversations stopped when she approached. Lunch invitations disappeared. Even her closest coworker avoided direct eye contact. The isolation was not direct confrontation, it was silent rejection. Rumors had already labeled her as someone who benefited from a personal relationship with Eric Hawthorne in exchange for career advancement. The accuracy of the rumor did not matter anymore. Repetition had already turned it into perceived truth. On the executive floor, Eric attempted to control the narrative by instructing HR to issue stricter communication guidelines. However, the move backfired, as employees interpreted it as an attempt to suppress evidence. Sarah quietly informed Eric that Mia's personnel file contained irregular approval timestamps, but Eric dismissed it without detailed discussion, instructing her to avoid speculation. This dismissal only deepened Sarah's internal doubt. Across the IT department, Daniel Brooks continued his silent investigation into the email anomaly, while Ryan Miller observed the social breakdown spreading across teams like a virus. Alex Mercer remained at the center of attention, but no longer felt like a participant in the company, only a subject under observation. Mia, once confident and visible, now felt like she was disappearing inside the very place she had worked so hard to rise in. The truth about her no longer mattered. Perception had already replaced reality. The atmosphere at Hawthorne Technologies had shifted from chaos into controlled aggression. The leadership team was no longer interested in understanding what had happened. They were focused entirely on finding someone to blame. A formal internal investigation was launched within hours of the email incident, led jointly by compliance and IT security. Alex Mercer was summoned to the 12th floor conference room, a place usually reserved for executive decisions, not low-level employees. As he walked through the hallway, he noticed conversations stopping mid-sentence and eyes following him with silent judgment. Alex, a 29-year-old communications coordinator with a slim build, brown, neatly parted hair, and anxious hazel eyes, felt the pressure of being treated like a suspect rather than an employee. In the conference room, Emily Carter led the questioning. Emily, a 38-year-old compliance officer, was tall and sharply dressed, with a rigid posture and silver blonde hair tied tightly back. Her reputation inside the company was built on uncompromising investigations after she once exposed a major internal fraud in a previous firm, an event that had hardened her personality and made her distrustful of anyone under pressure. She reviewed Alex's activity logs with clinical precision, asking direct questions about timing, email routing, and confirmation actions. Alex struggled to explain, his voice breaking slightly as he insisted it was an accident, but Emily's expression did not change. Meanwhile, in the IT control room, Daniel Brooks continued analyzing server behavior. Daniel, a 31-year-old thin man with pale skin, dark under-eye circles, and messy black hair, was deeply focused on a new discovery. His past experience of being wrongly blamed for a data breach had made him obsessive about verifying system integrity. As he re-examined log files, he found something alarming. Several access records from the moment of the email transmission had been partially deleted from within the internal network itself. This was not an external hack. It suggested someone inside the company had administrator-level access and was actively covering tracks. At the same time, Ryan Miller, a 24-year-old junior analyst with a casual appearance and nervous energy, quietly began mapping employee movement patterns using office badge logs. Ryan had no authority, but his curiosity and logical mindset pushed him to observe inconsistencies others ignored. He noticed a strange detail. A single unidentified internal device had accessed both HR and IT systems within the same short time window, something highly unusual under company protocol. Elsewhere in the building, a maintenance technician named Carl Dawson, a middle-aged man with a stocky build, unshaven face, and quiet demeanor, was seen moving between restricted floors, carrying out routine inspections. However, security footage later showed that Carl had paused near multiple surveillance hubs longer than necessary, though his official logs did not reflect any suspicious activity. His presence raised subtle questions, but no immediate conclusions. Back in the executive floor, Eric Hawthorne authorized a deeper forensic audit, but tensions grew as departments began blaming each other. Sarah Mitchell from HR, now increasingly anxious due to irregular employee file requests, quietly informed Emily that some audit trails seemed inconsistent with standard system behavior. Emily, however, instructed her to continue collecting data without drawing conclusions prematurely. Alex remained isolated in the interrogation room, realizing that the investigation was no longer about truth, it was about control. And somewhere inside the system, unseen and unidentified, someone continued manipulating traces of the original email, ensuring that the real source of the incident remained buried. The investigation inside Hawthorne Technologies had reached a silent conclusion long before any official statement was made. Someone had to be blamed. And Alex Mercer had already become the most convenient target. After hours of questioning, he was escorted back to the open office floor, but nothing felt the same. The distance between him and his co-workers had become absolute. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms, chairs turned slightly away from him, and even the sound of typing seemed to quiet in his presence. Alex, a 29-year-old communications coordinator with a slim frame, neatly combed brown hair, and exhausted hazel eyes, now carried the weight of a company-wide accusation without a formal verdict. His explanation of an accidental reply all was no longer being evaluated. It was being dismissed. In the executive office, Eric Hawthorne, a man in his mid-40s with a controlled posture, sharp facial features, and a calm but dominating presence, faced increasing pressure from stakeholders and board members, demanding accountability. Eric understood that to protect the company's image, a scapegoat was necessary. He did not explicitly say it, but the internal tone shifted toward containment rather than truth-seeking. Emily Carter, the compliance officer, remained strictly procedural, but even she began noticing inconsistencies in the digital audit trail. Emily, a tall and rigid woman with silver blonde hair tightly pulled back, and a reputation forged from exposing corporate fraud in a previous firm, had developed an instinct for patterns of manipulation. Yet this case felt different. The inconsistencies were not random errors, but structured omissions. Meanwhile, Mia Collins was beginning to unravel privately. Mia, 26, with long blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, and a carefully maintained professional appearance, had always relied on control and composure to survive workplace pressure. However, The growing isolation and public suspicion had destabilized her emotional state. She started receiving anonymous messages on her work account, some accusing her of being the reason behind the leak, others threatening her involvement with senior management. Her once confident demeanor now showed cracks. She began avoiding meetings and sitting alone during breaks, staring at her phone as if expecting another attack. In the IT department, Daniel Brooks intensified his investigation. Daniel, a 31-year-old thin man with pale skin, messy black hair, and a permanently fatigued expression shaped by years of system monitoring and past workplace trauma, now firmly believed the incident was not a simple human mistake. His analysis revealed that the email propagation path included a brief, unauthorized elevation of system privileges, occurring milliseconds before the send action. This suggested intentional interference layered over Alex's action. At the same time, Ryan Miller, the young analyst with a disorganized appearance and nervous energy, attempted to correlate employee badge logs with system access points. He discovered that a non-executive user profile had temporarily accessed both HR and IT directories during the exact incident window, but the profile was masked under routine maintenance credentials. On a lower floor, Sarah Mitchell from HR appeared increasingly distressed, as she noticed multiple requests for personnel data originating from senior accounts that were not logged through proper authorization channels. The pressure on Alex intensified further when internal messaging channels began labeling him unofficially as the leak source, a label spreading faster than any official communication. Eric's silence during these developments confirmed the direction the company had chosen. Daniel, however, quietly told Ryan that the evidence no longer pointed to a single mistake. It pointed to a coordinated setup designed to redirect blame. Somewhere inside the system, the truth was being rewritten in real time. The conference room on the 12th floor of Hawthorne Technologies felt colder than usual, not because of temperature, but because of intent. Every seat was occupied by senior management, legal advisors, and IT representatives, forming a silent circle of judgment around Alex Mercer. Alex, a 29-year-old communications coordinator with a thin build, neatly parted brown hair, and exhausted hazel eyes, stood at the center of the room. He had already been waiting for nearly an hour before the meeting officially began, and the silence during that time had slowly drained his confidence. Emily Carter, the compliance officer leading the session, sat at the head of the table. Emily was a tall woman in her late 30s, with sharp, angular features, silver blonde hair tied tightly back, and an expression that rarely revealed emotion. Her personality had been shaped by a previous corporate scandal in which she exposed internal fraud, but was later isolated by colleagues for being too strict, a past experience that made her both precise and emotionally detached in investigations. She opened the session with a calm but firm tone, presenting the timeline of the email incident. Across from her, Daniel Brooks was connected remotely through a secured video feed. Daniel, a 31-year-old IT specialist with a thin frame, pale complexion, and tired dark eyes, appeared tense. His obsessive attention to system integrity, developed after being wrongly accused of a breach in his former workplace, had led him to dig deeper than anyone else into the logs. He hesitated before speaking, then revealed that a critical 5-minute window in the email server logs was missing. This gap occurred precisely during the moment the email was sent, making it impossible to verify full system activity. Ryan Miller, the junior analyst, stood at the back of the room observing silently. Ryan, a 24-year-old with messy brown hair, casual clothing, and nervous energy, had been quietly mapping inconsistencies across departments. Though inexperienced, his analytical curiosity had led him to the same conclusion as Daniel. The system showed signs of deliberate interference rather than accidental misuse. However, his voice carried no authority, so his findings were not formally considered in the decision-making process. Sarah Mitchell from HR, a 33-year-old woman with soft features, shoulder-length dark hair, and a visibly anxious demeanor shaped by past workplace blame, attempted to raise concerns about inconsistencies in employee access logs, but was quickly dismissed as insufficient evidence. The focus of the room remained fixed on Alex. Despite repeated insistence that the email was an accident, Alex's explanations were increasingly met with silence rather than questions. Emily Carter presented the final compliance summary, stating that while system anomalies existed, No conclusive proof pointed to any specific external actor. In the absence of definitive evidence, responsibility defaulted to the last identifiable user action, Alex's workstation. Eric Hawthorne, though mostly silent during the meeting, gave a slight nod that signaled approval of the conclusion. His expression remained controlled, but his decision was clear. The company needed closure. Without further debate, the verdict was delivered. Alex Mercer was formally terminated for gross negligence in handling confidential corporate data. Security personnel were instructed to escort him out immediately. As Alex gathered his belongings in silence, Daniel's final observation lingered in the background. Someone had erased a crucial portion of the system history, and that someone was still inside the network. The escort through Hawthorne Technologies felt less like a dismissal and more like an erasure. Alex Mercer walked slowly past the same desks where he had worked for years, but no one looked at him anymore. Conversations continued, as if he had already become invisible. Alex, a 29-year-old former communications coordinator with a slim build, neatly parted brown hair, and exhausted hazel eyes, carried a small cardboard box containing his personal items. Each step toward the exit felt heavier, not from regret alone, but from the realization that the truth no longer mattered inside these walls. At the lobby entrance, security personnel paused briefly, waiting for final clearance from upstairs. In that moment, Alex turned slightly, looking back at the building that had defined his recent life. His voice was low, almost calm, but carried a final weight that cut through the silence. That email wasn't sent by mistake. No one responded. The doors opened, and he was escorted outside into the cold air. Inside the building, the aftermath of the decision was immediate. Employees resumed work, but the tension did not disappear. It simply shifted into silence. The company had chosen closure, but not resolution. In the IT control room, Daniel Brooks remained seated in front of multiple monitors. Daniel, a 31-year-old thin man with pale skin, messy dark hair, and tired eyes shaped by years of system monitoring and past professional betrayal, continued reviewing backup fragments of server activity. His instinct, sharpened by a previous incident where he was falsely accused of causing a security breach, made him refuse to accept the official conclusion. He noticed something critical. The surveillance system covering the IT corridor had a precisely erased segment matching the same 5-minute window missing from the email logs. This was not a system failure. It was coordinated deletion. Meanwhile, Ryan Miller, the 24-year-old junior analyst with disheveled hair, casual clothing, and anxious curiosity, sat alone at his desk reviewing badge access history. Ryan had always believed that patterns could reveal truth if observed long enough, but now those patterns seemed intentionally distorted. He realized that multiple systems, email, badge logs, and camera feeds, had been altered in sync, suggesting a level of access far beyond any single employee's role. On another floor, Sarah Mitchell from HR, a 33-year-old woman with soft facial features and a nervous, cautious demeanor shaped by past workplace blame, quietly reviewed employee transfer records. She noticed that several internal audit requests had been overridden by higher-level permissions without proper documentation, something that should have triggered automatic alerts, but did not. At the executive level, Emily Carter sat alone in the conference room long after the meeting ended. Emily, a tall, sharply dressed compliance officer in her late 30s, with silver blonde hair tied tightly back and an expression hardened by a past corporate scandal, replayed the final sequence of decisions in her mind. The absence of evidence had forced a conclusion, but her instincts told her that the absence itself had been engineered. As the lights of the building dimmed gradually for the evening cycle, a final, unnoticed system update executed silently across the internal network. Somewhere within the infrastructure of Hawthorne Technologies, a presence remained, unidentified, untraceable, and still active. The truth had not been uncovered, it had only been buried deeper. So now the question remains, what really happened inside Hawthorne Technologies? Was Alex Mercer truly just an unlucky employee who made a single fatal mistake? Or was he carefully chosen as the perfect scapegoat from the very beginning? And if the system logs, the cameras, and the email traces were all edited, then who had that level of access? Was it Eric Hawthorne, protecting the company at any cost? Was it Mia Collins, hiding something far deeper than rumors suggested? Or was it someone completely invisible, someone who never appeared in any meeting, but controlled everything from behind the system? If you were inside that company, who would you trust? Would you believe the official investigation, or would you keep digging even if it cost you your job? And most importantly, if you were Alex, would you have accepted the punishment silently, or fought back knowing the system itself was against you? Drop your answer in the comments. We want to know your theory. And if you enjoy dark corporate drama stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more shocking stories where every secret has a price.